Let's go to the next formula and let me note it down. Okay, now if error. So let's suppose you have a formula which is written, and sometimes in certain scenarios it is giving out an error. So how, and that error doesn't look good, okay, or you want a message to be displayed in instead of the error. What you can do is you can use an if error formula which will convert that error into a custom message that you want to convey, right? So let's first create uh, an error. So one of the most famous errors is 1 divided by 0, so that gives us a division by 0 error, right? What I can do here is I can use if error, and you would see that there are two parameters required. One is value and the other one is value if error. So what it means is I can use a function, different function or a calculation here as the first parameter, and if the output of this function is an error, it will give me whatever output that I give. Division by 0 error, right? So in this case it is a division by 0 error, right? Let's say if I convert that 0 into 1, the output will be exact same thing as this function should be giving, right? So there is no change in the behavior of the function which is inside of error. The only thing is, if the function outputs an error, the output of the if error will be this part, value if error. So that was the if error. Okay, now let's see if NA, right? Let's say I have A, B, C here, and then I have 1, 2, 3 here. I'll use VLOOKUP here because that's the only function I know that will give me that value. Okay, let's see. Okay, so this, you don't have to understand what I did with the VLOOKUP if you already don't know. But VLOOKUP is giving me an NA error, not available error, because there is no D in the selected range, right? So what I can do now is I can use if NA, right, and use this formula and then value if NA, and I can give my custom message not found, right? Which means that this function gave me a not available error message, and based on this I gave the not found error, right? It is exactly similar to if error. If error takes all kinds of errors into account. If NA is specific to not available errors. Now let's go to let and scan, right? So let function is a complex function which takes multiple inputs, and you can use those inputs within the function itself and get the desired output, right? So um, I'll take an example range. Okay, so let's say I have random between numbers 10 to 100, right? And I can copy and paste it in this range, let's say, right? Okay, now, so let me start by typing the formula let. Okay, and what you would look at is the different parameters that it requires, right? So let me first explain what these inputs mean, right? So name one is the name that you will give to a value range or a function in the second parameter, which is name value 1. What it means is, let's say I type in A and then comma and say this range, let formula will convert this M3 to M6 range and name it A. So if I use A anywhere within this formula, it will recognize this as the range M3 to M6, right? I can give as many names and take as many values or ranges with the same functionality. So let's say B, comma, and I take the second column, right? Which means that N3 to N6 will be named as B, and Excel will recognize B as N3 to N6 throughout this formula. Okay, now that we have defined these two columns as A and B, what we can now do is we can do any type of calculation that makes sense with these two names. So, for example, I want to sum these two arrays, right? So I'll take A plus B, right? And then I press enter. What it does is it takes these two values, sum them, give the output. It takes these two values, sum them, and these two outputs, right? Good thing is we don't have to worry about uh, creating a formula in four different cells, right? Conventionally, what I have to do is I'll take this plus this, right? And then I put the formula one by one, right? I don't have to do that anymore. I can use a simple let function and get this done directly. And it will be like if I change this 48 to let's say 12, right? It will still work. So let enables you to take any range or value or function, give it a name, and I can do it n number of times, and then at the end I can take all these values and do a logical calculation and then get the output into a single or multiple cells depending on the calculations that you have given. So that was let function. Now let's take scan function. So I'll start typing and then start explaining. Let's say you have an array with multiple values and you want to perform calculations on aggregate basis. So that means first I'll take the first value, then I take first and second value, and then first, second, and third value, and so on. Scan is one of the functions that can be used in order to achieve whatever you need, right? So let's say I delete these two columns, and let's say my goal is cumulative sum, right? What is cumulative sum? I take this value, okay, and then in the second row I take this value plus this value and so on, right? So let me start with the scan function with this goal in mind. So I'll start with the second cell, okay, from here. So scan, I take the initial value, which is the first value in the array, and then the rest of the values, and then we use a function, and here we use lambda function. What does lambda represent? It is on the fly function that takes n number of arguments and performs calculations based on it, right? So it will automatically recognize the first input as A, the second input as B, and so on. And then what I can say is A plus B, right? So what it means is it takes the initial value and then it takes values from this range M4 to M6 and it gives me summation one by one, right? So that means it will take M3 61 and then M4 only 61 plus 12, which is 73, and then M3 plus M4 plus M5, which is 141, and so on. So if I press enter, you will see this is the result. Obviously, it will not fill the first one because it is exactly as it is, right? So you can probably do the same thing that you have done here, right? But uh, this cumulative sum was much more easier than this one because we have to use lambda functions and so on, right? But this is just one example of what you can do with scan function. You can use any custom calculation, right? Multiplication, and then you could, let's say, add 2 here, right? So this will give you um, a much more flexibility in terms of what you can do, and this will be automated throughout. So with this scan function, we have completed all the important formulas that I wanted to cover within the logical segment of the formulas. Thank you.